I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I can talk. I can hang. I'm fine.
Welcome to the third story. I'm your host, Leo Sidrin. You know who you are, and that's Wes musician Adam Schatz on his many virtues. Folks, it's a snow day in Brooklyn, so I'm here with my daughter, Sol. Say hello, Sol.
Hello.
Adam Schatz is a very busy man. We spoke recently on the eve of his departure for a cross-country tour with his band, Landlady. Their most recent album
The World is a Loud Place
came out in January, immediately following the Winter Jazz Festival, of which Adam is a producer. I love the new Landlady album. It's the perfect combination of high-level musicianship and a good time, and I had a feeling that Adam would be a great guy to talk to. He's able to speak about the process of creativity, the business of booking music, and the life of a landlady. And I felt like we were old friends the moment we met. Maybe because we both have such nice beards. Before we get started with the conversation, let me play you a little taste of Landlady.
You're not the only person I know. You're not the only one that I go to when I'm happy and healthy or falling apart. You tell me I'm crazy. I'm sorry I went to it all. I don't wanna have to beg you to repeat your first words. Built a wall around the hole when the neighbors heard. Wrap your arms around my neck. I'd be lying if I said I can breathe in on my own. You're not the only person I know. You're not the only one that I go to when I'm happy and healthy or falling apart. You tell me I'm crazy. I'm sorry I went to it all. Water, water, I deserve it. Fire, fire, won't burn. Windows been broke into even thirds. Strap a compass to my chest. I'd be lying if I said I'm not lying down in bed.
I don't want to miss any of the good stuff, a lot of times.
Oh, you won't.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Happy February.
Thank you.
This has been a busy start of the year for you.
Sure.
Typical?
Yeah. Well, the Jazz Fest happens every January. And so that always is a thing where we're never, things are usually together, but it just becomes kind of a high stress zone. And sometimes it happens the first weekend of January, sometimes the second, but Winter Jazz Fest is always around that time. And I'm a co-producer of that. So there's it's just a culmination of 4 months of emails and working on stuff. That's always a run full speed way to begin the year. And then sometimes I can chill. I went to LA for a week right after that, and that was great. And mostly did some music, had some meetings, saw a lot of comedy, and just tried to do things I enjoyed in relatively positive weather.
Yeah.
It was cold and wet by the end, but it was fine. Yeah, and then came back and the record came out. So that's been on my mind for the past 6 months anyway. So I can both perpetually kind of relax. It's not hard for me to watch TV. I really enjoy it. So it's there's that gets balanced by at any moment in the day I might have to tackle something.
I really appreciate you saying that because you seem and you are very prolific. You're doing a lot of stuff.
I have lots of ideas.
Yeah.
But people, I often get asked, like, when do you sleep? And I'm like, well, like a lot. I don't have a job. Like, I can sleep in if I want to.
Yeah.
This year, I've been getting good. This past year-ish and this year, I've been getting good at, like, when I can, waking up at 8, which feels like that's early for me.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when things happen in the nighttime and the daytime because day sunlight feels good. My living room really only gets it till like 10. So
Right.
that's like, if you want to really feel alive in a morning, that's when I would do that. But it's also nice to like stay up late and be out and do New York things. I don't do that so much anymore.
My New York is a New York that tends to happen in daylight. It just always has been.
Yeah. When did you move here?
2005.
Sure. I moved here in 2006.
Yeah.
I've never been crazy. I don't party.
Yeah.
And I don't drink very much.
Yeah.
But I like hanging out and I like music. So I can get on a tear where I do stuff. And I'm of the age where still a lot of my friends all still live here
Yeah.
and do stuff all the time. So it's like if I want to plug in, there
Yeah.
is something every night. And it's more feeling guilty that I'm not doing that stuff.
But when you moved here in 2006, you didn't just plug in, you created something for other people to plug into. It seems like you started booking events pretty shortly after you got here.
I did. That was how I always did it. Even because I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts. That was a
North or south?
North. Yeah. Why? What do you know?
Oh, man, I have all these Newton friends, but they're all like...
From what? From camp?
College roommate was from Newton North, but I'm 10 years older than you, so you wouldn't know.
Still, though, where did you go to college?
University of Wisconsin.
Uh-huh.
I also know a lot of the Skavuvi and the Epitones crew.
Well, sure, I know the Skavuvi boys, too. Yeah, it was not... I met John Natchez,
Yep.
sax player John Natchez, currently plays in War on Drugs and does lots of nice things, but he's really just a nice Newton boy like me, but we're 10 years apart, and we
Yep.
both met playing in a horn section in, like, 2007 or 8
Yeah.
for our friend's band, and we were like in this rehearsal space, and he asked where I was from, and we were just like, ah, and all,
Man, talking to you, it feels very familiar to me. I think because of that crew, there's a kind of a point of view.
I'm a
an
good
aesthetic.
person. I'm a good person. I can talk, I can hang. I'm fine. But yeah, I mean, the main thing, anyone who's listening, do people listen?
I think so.
Great.
I hope so.
So if anyone who's listening wonders what Skavuvi is, I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to wonder. You know,
Yeah.
it's a poorly named ska band from the Boston suburbs where they make poorly named ska bands in a factory. I was in a poorly named ska band 10 years after they were.
Really? It was still happening? The ska thing was still happening?
Oh yeah. I didn't know about it till I was like recruited from band where
Yeah.
like I was in concert band playing the sax,
Yeah.
had my own kind of pop band where I played piano and sang. And then one of the other clarinet players came up to me and he was like, yeah, I play guitar in a ska band. Like, do you want to come play sax with us? And I was like, yeah, totally. If like an older dude wants me to join his band, that sounds
Yeah.
like a smart decision. And they're all psyched on like Less Than Jake and Real Big Fish and all that junk.
And what were you psyched on?
I was very flexible at the time.
Did you see yourself at that point as a saxophone player, or were you already kind of multifaceted
I always
guy?
did both because I started on piano and then did sax in like the 4th grade and then I always played like sax in the like jazz bands and concert bands and then wrote songs on the piano and started a rock band in the 9th grade. And then there's always been a little bit of overlap, but I tended to kind of keep the instruments and personalities associated with them separate until very recently.
I saw on your website that you have one of your bands, you say, we met studying, quote, jazz at, quote, NYU.
Oh no, I don't even remember. I don't know what website you're even talking about.
I know, it's a Tumblr website of yours. That
Oh,
seems
cool.
to
Yeah,
have
so that's probably ancient.
Yeah.
But that could have been Father Figures, maybe.
Yeah.
That band's not too active right now, but is still, whenever we want to plug back in, we do it. But it was all 5 of us met at NYU in the jazz program and kind of learned improvisation, and we practiced improvisation together. We had really good teachers. We studied a lot with Ralph Alessi and Wayne Krantz and Dave Pietro and these folks who really just let us do our thing, and it kind of evolved out of that. But if you look at a band that has 2 saxophones in it, and it used to be upright bass all the time, and now it shifted more to electric, but it'd be hard not to call it a jazz band. But then you listen to it and it's not, never swings, never really goes there. It can get beautiful and it can get chaotic. It's kind of improvised rock music, but it's not really that thing either. So it's, definitely went for like Can and Lounge Lizards when we weren't really listening to either of those bands yet and didn't know we were copying someone. I don't know. I've never been a huge fan of solos unless they're really good solos. But the idea, when you see a jazz group and everyone just like takes turns soloing, it's so much less interesting to me than a band developing an improvisatory idea collectively.
But that's an interesting thing for you to say, man, because, you fulfill multiple roles. One of your roles is as a kind of a curator and a facilitator of
Yes.
improvised music. And even to hear you have a strong aesthetic opinion about it is a little jarring in the sense that you're also the person that makes it available to people.
Yeah, it's unusual. In general, as someone being an organizer and facilitator, also being a musician, and doing one's best not to actually compromise either of those sides is a little unique. I think it gives me some of my curatorial ability, but it's, like anyone, there's definitely a bias. I want to present the things I like in the context of ideas like the improvised round robin duets thing, which we've done with Red Bull Music Academy a bunch and done at the Jazz Fest and on our own. That was just an idea I had, which was sort of taking my feelings on the music and these people who I thought were great and said, okay, what's a concept that can create positive limitations that facilitates the best musical outcome?
Mm-hmm.
So that idea is there's 15 to 20 musicians, put them in a random order. Artist 1 goes on stage, improvises for 5 minutes. Number 2 goes up and joins for 5 minutes. Number 3 goes up and number 1 leaves the stage. And it's this continuous, spontaneous piece. And an audience gets tricked into hearing like an hour and a half of improvised music. And it's great. And I don't think I could have just had that idea if I wasn't also a musician and sort of understood the idea of pace and contour and phrase. I don't know. I don't talk or think about it too much because when it works, it just works.
Mm-hmm.
But as I get more involved, right now the organizational side of me is happiest when musical parts of me can also be involved.
Uh-huh.
At the Jazz Fest, I usually keep it totally separate. It's more of a job, and I don't want to book myself. I've never done that.
Winter Jazz Fest has been around for 13 years. You've been involved for 8 years.
Yeah.
So you were in your early 20s when you got involved.
Yeah, and before that, I was organizing just shows in New York under the name Search and Restore, which is a nonprofit I have kind of dedicated to the development audience and artists of improvised and creative music, sort of in a lull right now, but when it relaunches, I want to have the mantra, music you've never heard before.
Uh-huh.
So it's not really jazz oriented anymore. It's just creative music that comes from or harbors spontaneity within it, and by definition isn't boring.
Uh-huh.
I get bored a lot.
What did you find when you moved to New York that made you think, I feel like I can contribute something here. I want to bring something to this scene?
When I brought up where I was from, it was just because I organized shows in my hometown, because that was what you did. If your band wanted to play somewhere, you had to like rent the teen center and sign a contract as like a 14-year-old and give them $100 and bring your own PA and do a show. So I already had muscle memory for doing that sort of thing. And then when I was first in New York, I was more organizing rock shows.
But you came to study jazz.
Yeah, I was here to study jazz mostly because that was a music major.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just seemed, if I did it all again, I don't know if I would, because I think jazz degrees are flawed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what it prepares you for other than...
Teaching jazz?
Yes, that's the thing. The people who affected us the most, when you zoomed out and looked at what they were doing, they did have careers, but they were definitely surviving because they were teaching. And it's like, oh, so if you don't want to be a teacher, they really gloss over that because it's the opposite of what they're promising you with that program. I mean, they really talk big at NYU about, they would kind of spotlight the students who really went somewhere. But that's rare, and I feel like most of us there weren't even that hungry to have like jazz careers, actually, if we knew what that meant. But I got to meet a bunch of amazing folks, and I mean, half of us have like just careers playing in people's bands anyways, and that's fine. But I don't know, yeah, if I had gone to study composition or music technology maybe, but I wasn't that psyched on either of those things at the time. So who knows? I just knew that was a major I could have. Yeah. And that it could get me to a city where I could do other things. But to your question of like thinking I had something to offer, I was 18 and like running around to all these shows in the city, seeing improvised music, and they were always it would either be one cover and then you'd get kicked out before the next set, or it would be too expensive, at least for me at the time. It would be 15 or 20 bucks. Now that doesn't seem that much, but who knows? I just wanted to create an environment where you could do double bills, which I always felt was really important, to just give people more for their money and expose artist audiences to each other. It seemed really not conducive to growth to have everyone's performing situations in New York be totally dependent on just like, you play, people come to see you, then they leave, the end. And it's like, oh, but that's so opposing of what the community actually is, where everyone plays, everyone knows each other, a lot of people play in each other's bands, support each other. It can be really hard to follow that if you're not a total diehard. So through Search and Restore, I wanted to kind of facilitate.
Is that why you named it Search and Restore?
I don't know why I named it that. I don't know why I named most of my things what they're named, but I know when I have a good name. That name was a little confused. I mean, people get that name wrong. They'll say Search and Destroy. Because if it's a play on anything, they'll accidentally think it's a thing. But I do still think it's a good name. Landlady will get called Ladyland sometimes. Father figures will get called Founding Fathers sometimes. I mean, you can't really win.
Yeah. You got here studying jazz because it was the music degree that you could get, but you started booking rock shows at the same time.
Yeah, because it was also, I mean, it was important to me to stay plugged into that world. Because that's, I mean, in general, it's always what I listen to more of. I don't listen to that much jazz. I didn't know anything about new music at the time.
Yeah.
And I had to be like kind of severely educated just by the people around me in the program who were just like, hey, go see this, go see this. And then I'd go see it and was like, oh, this is really quite cool. So that was one part of my education, was going to all these shows, living in Manhattan for 2 years and being able to just like run around to the 55 bar and Jazz Gallery and do that. And then the rock shows we did them at the Knitting Factory a lot, and then Southpaw, and we would have comedian hosts on those. It was a good way to just like tie things together. And it was the same idea, though. We were seeing shows at Pianos and Mercury Lounge where the crowd would completely turn over between every band,
and the onus is on the artist in that case also. I mean, as you sort of started to talk about earlier as well, each act is kind of held accountable for their own audience and what they can draw and in their ability to connect with their audience. What you're talking about is kind of reaching beyond the specific audience of every band.
Yeah, and the thing I've always tried to do with everything, like the umbrella of everything I do, period, is make people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. And for live music, I mean, that can come from the performance and also just from making it not feel like a product-consumer relationship. And this doesn't happen as much anymore, which is cool, but it was really happening when I was first moved here, where you go to those shows, Pianos and Mercury for sure. I'm sure Arlene's Grocery and other places that I like never went to did it as well, but they would poll you at the door. So if you were going into the show, they'd say, who are you here to see? And then they'd mark you down.
Yes.
And that would justify how they'd pay the band.
That's right.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
It makes logical sense, but it's not what it's about. And it's really frustrating. And that also immediately plants a seed in the attendee's mind where they're like, okay, I'm here to see one group. So when they're done, I'll leave. Or if someone's on, I'll go drink instead of watching them. And it's also a quality issue if the things aren't all good or don't make sense, energy-wise, not musically necessarily, because I like to have things that sound pretty different be juxtaposed. Then it's going to be tough to retain people. So that's sort of how I cut my teeth, was in doing that. And then it just evolved into, one of my friends and father figures at the time was just like, you should do this for jazz, because it really wasn't happening. And I was getting kind of burnt out when I was starting to deal with like booking agents and stuff. And it was like, well, this isn't really what I want. And I can't afford to pay this band from Philadelphia $800 to come play in New York. So
Right, so we'll go to
let's
jazz.
pivot.
It's cheaper. Pivot to the cheaper music.
It's cheaper and it's not cheaper. There's like expectations to be paid, and I learned that on the way. But there was just a lot more freedom. Everyone lived here, and the scene at that time was really hungry for anyone to, I think, just be a presenter in general. There wasn't that much of that happening, and just some like youthful energy. Just getting, because I was in school at the time, I could like really promote amongst the schools. That was really the only time I was like a promoter. Now I would never bill myself as that, but I like being an ideas person and an organizer. But at that time I was so much of the audience at those shows were people from NYU or New School or SUNY Purchase, and they'd hear about the shows and come down, and they'd be really well attended, and that was exciting. It was exciting for the audiences just to not be at your usual show, and the artists were psyched just to not be doing the same thing they do all the time.
Yeah. When you talk about in recent years finding a way to bridge the gap between your kind of jazz education or your saxophone identity and your songwriting and your more progressive rock identity, and the music that you're making today kind of wholeheartedly embraces whatever you want to be doing, it would make sense that you start presenting music that lives in an equally borderless world.
Yeah, and that's what I'm best at. It's like if you want someone to book your jazz show, you can find someone. It shouldn't be me. I'm actually not that qualified as of now.
Yeah, but you're still so connected in that scene.
I try. Luckily with the Jazz Fest, a lot of stuff comes to me.
Mm-hmm.
People just cold call and send me emails a lot, and I try to listen to everything. And every so often I'm genuinely surprised. I have friends who still play a lot in that scene here. I'm on tour a lot now, so I actually don't get to go out as much. It kind of happens in waves. And I've recently been booking at Threes Brewing in Gowanus, and that's been mostly artist residencies and things where the artists are in charge of their own bill, but it's giving me more reason to pay attention again because it's a space. And that's nice because it's a little more hands off. Like bands who want to play there, I can treat differently than bands who want to open for Landlady or play the festival necessarily, where I have much fewer opportunities and much more of a strong opinion of what I want to associate directly with myself. But if I think something's quite good, but not necessarily my cup of tea, I can still give them a show at Threes. And I think that's great.
Right. So at the festival, there are a few curators or a few.
Yeah. The founder, Bryce, books a lot of it. We outsource some stages. Megan from Revive Music does the stage. Every year there's a couple other outside presenters who take a stage. There's Hot Jazz. Sometimes there's a French jazz stage, ECM Records the past couple of years. And then I kind of fill in the gaps, usually like 30-40% of the rest. And then these one-off shows, Sam Amidon show, this Monk tribute that we did, which is also kind of an improvising, rotating cast. It changes a little every year. The past couple of years, I've kind of handled the artist in residence situation. So we had Andrew Surreal this year and Dave King last year, which makes me think we need to not have a drummer this next time.
I don't know. I don't. Why stop now?
Well, it's just a lot, and they're hard to deal with.
What did your parents do and think of you pursuing this?
They have jobs, but they also play music. They play like Western swing and bluegrass and that sort of thing. And so I play music because they made me. They made sure it was around me when I was young. I took lessons. I did it as long as I wanted to. I stopped taking piano lessons because they were like, well, you're not practicing both. So you're going to have to pick piano or saxophone. And I stuck with sax, but then was always still just futzing around on the piano.
Yeah.
And somehow can still get better doing that. So they've only been encouraging. Now that my two younger siblings are also out in the real world and making more money than me, that's mostly good still. That kind of takes more weight off, and then I can be the one who does it the unorthodox way. But
that's right.
I think this as I race to 30, they're a little curious as to how it will level up.
Even when NPR is loving your music,
sure. I've always got great press.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean a thing.
You can't pay the rent with press.
You can't. It's nice. It looks nice and there is value to it. But it is, sometimes it is easy to then just zoom out and be like, oh, but how do I make this into something? Which is that's the crux of being someone who wants to do a lot of different things at once. I think if I had a steady job somewhere, and there could be a few that I'm qualified for as a performing arts presenter or something like that. And I think I would lose my mind.
Yeah.
Because I want to always be a performer. And that drive is actually only growing more and more as I think I'm getting better and better and seeing a positive response. So cutting back on that seems really stupid. But I also want to not only do that because that is also stupid from a fiscal point of view and maybe even an emotional point of view to put so much weight on that it kind of becomes something you don't enjoy anymore.
Well, as your presenter life started to unfold, how did it affect your performing side?
It always happened in tandem. And it was like, I didn't want to tour my own projects until I knew there was any demand for it because I didn't want to burn anything out. I mean, with touring, there's really a shelf life for it. Every time you do it, you lose a little tolerance for doing it for $0 and like no bed. Now there's a few dollars and like 2 beds for 4 people. And that's okay. I'm still at that threshold where that's okay.
Yep.
And in like 4 years, that might be gone. Who knows? The scale tipped a little bit where it was, at one point I was focusing on Search and Restore and the festival and presenting a lot of the time. I mean, at that time I was still playing that's sort of how my reputation of being in a million bands came from, because I was playing in like 5 bands around town. And then I joined Man Man, who were a pretty successful band. And that was my first time getting like paid to go on tour. And that was great. And by nature of that, I had to stop a bunch of other things because that was touring a lot. And I was trying to get Landlady really off the ground with our last record. So that kind of forced me to really cut back. And then I eventually quit Man Man because I wanted to only do me things.
I'm going to go and get us a pitcher of water.
Sure.
I'd like to invite you to
Yeah.
tell me a story or something while I'm not in the room,
Okay.
and I'll discover it later.
Yeah, I wonder what that'll be.
It doesn't have to be a story. It can be anything.
I'm trying to think of something recent, though. I mean, the good California story was...
Musician, searcher, and restorer Adam Schatz just about to tell the good California story. But before that, let me tell you about the Third Story website. third-story.com is the place to go. It's the hub from which you can stream, sign up for emails, subscribe on iTunes if you like iTunes, Stitcher if you like Stitcher, find links to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, and YouTube accounts. Or you can just hang out there and explore all the past episodes. Meanwhile, somebody asked me yesterday why I do this podcast. It's one of those questions that should have an answer already prepared, but I didn't and I don't have one. I can tell you that it's not for the money, at least not at the moment. And I can tell you that it's essentially for personal reasons, to connect with my direct and my extended community of musicians and creative people. Every time I have one of these conversations, I feel a little more a part of something bigger. And I get enough feedback from listeners that gives me the sense that maybe these conversations are bringing all of us together a little closer into a community. So I'd like to ask you a couple things. Number one, let me know what you like and what you'd like to see happen with the Third Story. Are there people that you'd like to hear me talk to? And number two, are there any people in your life who you think might like to hear these conversations about desire, ambition, creativity, improvisation, and all the rest of it? Would you be willing to let those people know about the Third Story podcast and grow this community, the one we share together, a little bigger? And now, the moment we've been waiting for, from Adam Schatz, the good California story.
I was just in California. I went to Santa Barbara to visit a friend who I grew up with, played music with, and he's a 2-year-old now with his wife. We were on the beach in the early morning because 2-year-olds wake up in the early morning. And an old man came up to us, and he was gripping a newspaper, and he said, "Do you have a watch?" We looked at him, and he said, "Do you have the time?" And we gave him the time, and he said, "In 20 minutes, a rocket's going to go off over there." And he pointed over there. And we said, "Okay, old man." And then we looked it up, and it was true that the SpaceX rocket was going to launch from the Vandenberg Air Base, which is right there, like, I don't know, a couple miles away from where we were on the beach. And so we waited, and we watched an actual rocket shoot up into space with a fiery tail, and it disappeared. And then later in the video, CNN posted, it lands back in the middle of the ocean on a drone ship. The end.
Perfect timing, right?
Nailed it.
Could feel it.
Uh-huh.
I'll leave this next to you.
Thank you.
A little dry. So when you went to LA, you were listening to and watching comedy.
I went to a lot of comedy. I went to UCB a lot just because I'm really psyched about that stuff. And I did one show. I played on the Matt Besser podcast called Improv for Humans. And it's great. I listen to it a lot. I've become a pretty big fan of a lot of the people who are on it. And I kind of just cold call, emailed him asking if I could be a part of a taping if he was doing it that week, and they were doing a live show. And so in the middle of the show, I came up and just played one song, and then they asked me a question about it, and then they did a scene based off it. It was great. It was the best. You can find it online. I've learned, but it's really, that was really, really fun.
I am a big comedy fan too.
Yes.
A lot of musicians I know are big comedy fans. When you described the round robin thing, for example, it really reminded me of like one of the basic tenets of improvised theater, which is just saying yes and.
Yeah. There's a shared core to that. You would never want to present it in the same room at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how actually like music and comedy juxtaposed is almost impossible
Really?
to make work. It's really tough. In the setting that I did it, I think it's nice, especially if you like I can be a pretty compelling and weird and funny solo performer. Mm-hmm. But the other way around, when you have like comedians open for bands, most of the people in the room are just not interested. And it's unfair to everyone. Mm-hmm. Like the audience isn't prepared to be in that mindset. It's just like, I think you mentally need to come prepared a little differently when you're approaching those things. In terms of like social disruption, it's fun to do. But also with like improv comedy and improvised music, when you see people who are incredible at it, you can't believe it's happening in front of you. It's so impressive. And it's really, I mean, that to me is the shared value. And especially, I mean, the way me and my friends at least approach a lot of improvised music is we aim for it to sound composed. Mm-hmm. There's compositional elements in it. So you, in the same way that improv comedy, if they can like nail a beat and it's so funny to the degree where you're like, how could that have not been written? It comes from a similar place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely understand that. It's interesting to hear you say that music and comedy don't necessarily work together because, of course, in the old classic Catskills model, they worked together beautifully when they were all sort of behaving, I guess, as essentially as entertainment.
Yeah, and it was all schmaltzier.
Yeah.
I mean, the music was schmaltzier and the comedy was schmaltzier. I mean, it can work.
Yeah.
It's just often that situation where I think from an audience perspective, it can be challenging to absorb it all. I mean, even just like one is better sitting down and one is better standing up. Mm-hmm. So that's tough.
But as you say, also, there can be something kind of comic in the way you approach. I mean, comic may not be the right word, but funny, compelling,
Well,
humorous.
Humor's the right thing. Yeah. And with all performance, and as a presenter too, when I thought about the jazz artists I really loved, I'm really turned on when people's personalities can be communicated through their performance. If I see someone rip jazz saxophone, but if I close my eyes and it could be anyone, even if it's the most like technically able thing in the world, that doesn't really move me. Mm-hmm. And I think people taking themselves too seriously usually doesn't move me either. So it's when someone has humor. It doesn't mean it's funny necessarily. It just, and I have a couple of songs that lean more towards like the Randy Newman, Jonathan Richman style of being
100%.
being obvious in that way. But a lot of it is just in how I carry myself. It's a translation and a magnification and an explosion of my personality, which is I'm silly and weird and I like making lots of jokes, but I also care about big things. Mark Juliana's like unhealthily obsessed with Andrew Dice Clay. Huh. Which it makes sense when you really think about it, because he's from New Jersey, and he is a funny dude. Yeah. And it's like when you watch Mark play the drums, it's not funny other than like, how can someone do that? But there's like unmistakable humor in it, which is great. There's no downside to it. And that's, I mean, it's when it works well, I think it's totally seamless. And it's someone just being able to let their guard down completely and actually be themselves musically. That has to be paired with technical ability and research, just absorbing music that you love. But yeah, I mean, when it works, it's my favorite thing about most of my favorite artists, I think.
I read a review of your show last week at House of Yes, that basically led with the idea that it's one of the rare opportunities seeing your band to see music that is both technically very high and also easy and enjoyable to listen to.
Yes, I thought that was a very nice thing to say. It's hard to have something be technically impressive. I mean, again, it's important that that isn't the point. So that's why someone could say our music's mathy. When there's time signature changes in our music, it's really not on purpose. We don't count it out.
Well,
it's usually done because it serves the song. It can come from a core idea of like, how can this become a little more unique and interesting to listen to? Sometimes it just like jolts people out, because I've never been a huge fan of that. I mean, it usually happens when I listen back and I'm like, oh, the first song.
Absolutely.
First song on the record, Electric Abdomen, has a lot of 5 in it.
I got electric skin on my abdomen. You feel the fire fight, but you won't begin. Loosen rib by rib, sucking oxygen. You feel your heartbeat once, there it goes again. There it goes again. There it goes again. There it goes again. There it goes. Your electric.
And you take the breath in between the lyric. You take the beat.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. It's about the beat. Woody Guthrie did it too. He sang when he wanted to sing, and the phrases were the phrases. That song was also written to be like maybe our most stable song, because the last record had so much starting and stopping. There's a personal challenge this time around that I only half failed to meet, which was like, how can I write a couple of cruisers? How can I really have some things that are much more steady?
Well, that says a lot about you if that's your cruiser that's in and out of 4 and then the bridge completely turns left.
Staring at people, daring yourself to move. Staring at people, daring yourself to move. Side by side.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the way I am. Who knows why? Most of it, again, happens. None of that's happening because it's like, we got to find a way to fit more stuff in. If anyway, it's like there were lots of good ideas when we recorded, and then we had to struggle to take a lot of it out.
Yeah. The highest compliment I think that you can pay is that it is reminiscent of a lot of things and yet doesn't sound like anything other than what it is.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. We all have influences, and it's silly to not pretend that they totally shape the music you make.
Yeah.
But if I Sly and the Family Stone is one of my biggest influences.
Yeah.
We don't sound like Sly and the Family Stone, but we, I think, are actually like pushing from a similar energy that they did, because they didn't follow many rules. They kind of went wherever they went. Anyone could very quickly say, oh, they're a funk band, but they weren't a funk band. They were so much more. They were a funky band.
But hearing your records, the sonic language of the Beatles is very clear.
That's huge. And that's when we never, the last record, we didn't get that comparison at all. And it's a crazy one to make. But, the last one we got compared to the Talking Heads a lot, the Dirty Projectors, and it was always
New York art.
Yeah, it was very clear why those things were. I mean,
Yeah.
for one, there was New York Times said it, and then everyone else just said it too. So, I mean, those are, I love those bands. That's a wonderful thing. But it's not that hard to see where the comparisons come from. And it's like, oh, they're weird, or they're,
Right.
There's all these things. I mean, this record we made sound as good as we could. It's really our most hi-fi record. It goes lots of places, spent a long time mixing it with care and shape. And it's all the language of the Beatles. I mean, they totally redefined how you can make creative recorded music. When we were going into this record, one of the owners of the label and someone I look up to and trust very much gave me the advice to make a shot list for every song. That's more of a film term where you literally have a list of every shot that's going to happen and define the placement of it.
Huh.
And in terms of music, we kind of I approached it from a point of view where I would listen to the rough mixes of the songs over and over again and chart out every moment that I thought was valuable. And sometimes that was just verse chorus, but often that was a 2-bar section where this one backing vocal thing happens and it's really great. Or, I mean, any new idea that felt it needed to be highlighted. And then as we mixed left to right. So we would just go moment to moment. And I really, most of the time, forced my engineer not to let us move on until the first moment was almost totally mixed. And then we would move to the next thing. And it sort of was like an exquisite corpse. And it worked really well for the most part. But it meant there was a lot of activity in each of the songs.
Yes.
Because if you want to highlight what the bass does for this one beautiful bass moment, you need to kill all the frequencies that it shares with other instruments from the other instruments so that it can really be highlighted.
So you're automating stuff from moment by moment.
The whole record.
You're pulling frequencies around to be
all
able
the
to
time.
showcase
all the
different
time,
instruments.
filtering frequencies. And it was, again, never done to excess, even though if you looked at the shot list for some of these songs, it'd be insane. But it was actually the only way to have it be heard properly and make it dynamic and fluid. And ultimately, it doesn't sound choppy when you listen to it. It can sound kind of otherworldly, and that's exciting. It involved a lot of kind of labor work on the back end, but that's what it took to get it to that place. Easy things are easy to mix, and these were a little complicated, so we had to do it right.
Adam Schatz on Doing It Right. I'm reminded of my conversation last summer with recording engineer Al Schmidt. That's episode 55 for those of you keeping track, in which he describes his general philosophy and flow for recording and mixing music, which is almost at the exact opposite end of the spectrum from what Adam describes here. It just goes to show there isn't one right way to do any of this stuff, but there are many ways to get it wrong. Wait, there isn't one right way to do this stuff. There are many ways to get it right. I suppose there are a few ways to get it wrong, too. In this final piece of our chat, Adam explains to me why I need to leave my house more often. Then he describes the intricate system he developed for songwriting. Spoiler alert, it involves lots of Post-it notes.
I have been going through a complicated time in my relationship with New York.
Well, it sucks.
Well, it's not easy.
We have to leave.
Yeah.
We can't stay here.
We can't stay here.
It's not getting better. It's the best. We can never leave.
We have to leave.
We can't, but we have to.
Right,
Yeah, I think about it all the time.
People who have a lot of musical education, understanding about music, a wide palette to draw from, and both appreciate the technical questions of music and also the rawest emotion. That's the best of New York.
And there's versions of it other places, but it's not the same. Nashville has incredible guitar bands. Richmond has incredible horn bands.
L.A.?
LA thinks they're getting better, but I don't know if they are. It's never going to have the manic drive that New York has, which means you might not always know when it's happening. I'm sure amazing stuff happens in LA behind closed doors every day.
Yeah.
I mean, really good songwriters in LA may be better than New York a lot of the time because the technical ability can often obscure the song. And I think about that all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, and then a lot of the other cities are just smaller cities. So there's going to be there's just so many here, but it's because everyone thinks we need to be here. But
the question,
but you can't all move, right? That's all the dream. It's like, okay, well, how do we all just move somewhere else?
Well,
how do
I'll
we
tell
all
you,
just move to Cincinnati?
Toledo, man. Here's the thing about Toledo.
Can't be
There's
Toledo.
yeah, sure it can, because it's totally available.
I know.
It's ready for you.
I know, but it can't be but then that's the Detroit conversation.
Yes, it's exactly the same
It's
conversation.
really Detroit because Detroit's actually readily available. Like we could all buy houses.
Yeah.
Even me. But it's like, well, why would I move to a cold place that isn't New York?
Right.
Like this conversation happens so much.
Upstate.
I have real estate notifications of upstate every day.
Yeah.
5 new ones. And I'm like, And I think about it. I've spent time up there.
Yeah.
I was in Hudson for a weekend thinking about like, maybe I can move up here. And in the course of that weekend, I went full circle twice.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh, this would work. This is how I do it. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it happened fully twice.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of waiting for a universal thing to just force me to move.
I think everybody is.
So then maybe I die here. And that's fine. It'll actually probably be when I get kicked out of my apartment because I have a really cheap scenario.
But at the same time, hearing you talk about it and I have a feeling wherever you go, whenever you go, it's you. It's not New York that brings this energy in the room. It's you. So you'll have the same energy around whatever you're doing. But it does kind of give me a sense of, right, this is what we are getting here. This is why we're here. On the other hand, when you talk about filling a room and having half of the people be musicians because those are your friends, I mean, that can only happen in a place like New York because you can't have that many musician friends in any other city. There aren't that many musicians to know.
You can. They just might not be as good.
Right.
But it's tough to make friends anyways. I feel very lucky.
Right.
It's hard, but I mean, it's like we were saying. If you're having that crisis, you might just need to leave the house more. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you live here where you live, you should just probably go to Barbez.
Yeah.
You should go to Corzo.
Yeah.
You should go to Threes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. You can just walk.
Yeah.
You could walk to a new place every 3 nights.
Yeah.
And just have your mind blown by something and be like, oh, this is why.
Yeah. By the way, I do go to Barbez on Friday afternoons to see Brian Dry play.
Oh, that's really,
where I go.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. You already have the way you describe it is already too much of a routine.
Yes.
And you need to just mess it up a little bit more.
So I guess I do feel that we should talk a little bit about the songs on the new record and about just, hearing that you recorded it a year ago.
Yes. Yeah, I wrote most of these songs in the course of like 4 to 5 months leading up to the recording. Because we had hit like the touring behind the last record really kind of ended. We weren't getting any new opportunities or offers, and I was a little frustrated by just the nature of putting something out and then it stops, and if you're not touring, you're really wondering if anyone cares at all and if you've made any impact. So I was like, okay, well, we should turn around and try to make another one as quickly as possible and see if it can be good. And it was not. I mean, it's always cool when there's a break in songwriting because you sit back down and you are writing new songs. Some people get very frustrated by that. There's a perspective where it's like, oh, I forget how to write songs. And I think that's not super healthy. And it's like, if you say that enough, then that might end up being true. But for me, I think you just change and you grow. And so when you sit down, I mean, there was maybe 2 songs that made this record that had seeds in the couple of years before it, but everything else really came out of this like 4 or 5 month period where I every day just wrote a lot and sorted through 100 voice memos I had on my phone and developed a system where if I decided a voice memo was good enough on first or second listen, I would sketch it out, just the guts of it, chords, and if there's a melody idea, put it on a Post-it note. 2 Post-its would go onto a notebook page of a notebook. So each page had 2 songs on it, potentially.
But it's just a little sketch. It's just chord
little
melodies.
sketch. And then...
No lyrics.
No. And they'd all get numbered. And so once I had, by the time I put like 10 of them down, then every time I sat down, I could both spend a little bit of time going through more voice memos and adding those, and then go back to some of the ones that were in there and say, okay, let's flesh this one out and see if it goes anywhere. And if it did, I would write in the notebook next to the Post-it and add things. So whether it's lyrics or form or whatever. And if I ever got stuck, sometimes I could connect 2 of those together. But it was a way to like build a kick into the brain. So rather than it be the thing where you sit down at the piano and nothing comes out and you're like, well, nothing's coming out today, you can flip open to any page and say, what about that idea? Play back a recording. Maybe something happens. Maybe something doesn't, but it creates more avenues of approach. And it's both organized, but still messy in the way that creativity can thrive.
I never have related to these kinds of systems that people have described over the years. I mean, I have a phone full of voice memos, and I have a lot of times that I sit at the piano and start something and don't finish it, or pick up the guitar and put it away. And I still am totally at the mercy of those moments when either out of necessity or good fortune, they just happen.
This was a first. I'd never done it this way.
Yeah.
It was also the first time I had written more than 1 song at once.
Yeah.
Where there was like, at any given point, 5 songs that were to some point of completion that had a goal in mind.
And where do lyrics come? Then where do the words come? Because you have a very strong lyrical point of view.
Yeah. It's different every time. I mean, again, there's like a Evernote in my phone that's lyrics, and they're just loose. Anytime I think something could be something,
Yeah.
and it's usually not tied to music or rhythm, it just goes in here and goes on forever.
Yeah.
But I wonder if I go to the bottom of this,
Yeah.
if there's anything that made it. These aren't, I think I did get rid of a bunch of them. I mean, I do have a note in here that says open a song with the chorus, which is so hard to do. And the Beatles are one of the only ones who did it a lot. But it's such a bold move. And we did it on this album. We did it on Person. I think that's the only song we were able to do. But that was the seed for that song, was like a song needs to be open with the chorus. That one ended up kind of sounding like the Cars, which was cool. Because I would have never thought I'd write a Cars song.
Yep.
But maybe it's the Boston thing. You sort of black out. I don't have like vivid memories of sitting down and writing lyrics. Recently a song just like came start to finish very quickly. It can help that sometimes I don't always know what they're about.
Do you know what they're about when they're finished?
Yeah. Sometimes I have to decide. Sometimes it's very clear. I mean, the song Driving in California is it's kind of a departure.
Yes.
Both for this band, it's a little risky because it is such like an earnest, on the nose song. And that's one that was the only song that came, I had already been playing before the year. I played it solo, and it is its own thing when it's solo. I like what the band does with it too.
Yeah.
But that's one that really equally can exist on both of those planes.
Driving in California makes me forget everywhere that's not California. Driving in California makes me forget everything that's wrong in the places that are not part of California. Driving in Colorado makes me happy. If you're not familiar, darling, you should drive through Colorado. Driving to Niagara in a downpour feels redundant, but I love it. California couldn't touch it.
Adam Schatz, let's wrap this up.
Cool.
You said something briefly about how you feel like you are at a good moment in your life, in your career. You know, I asked you if there had been a moment of transition when you realized that you had joined the community that you sort of sought out to join, and you sort of said, I'm in that moment right now.
Yeah. Well, not just me. It was really, it's me and like my friends. I mean, I think it's a point of pride and a level of being able to know how good everyone is and how it's talent and it's perspective, and it's a thing that does come with age, even when you're 23 and you think you absolutely know enough to be able to represent yourself. But you also, I don't know, when you write songs at that age, it's so hard to, you know there's more life to live before you can really become a point of view that anyone cares about. So I think I am entering that zone, which feels really nice, but I also do feel I need to live so much more life, because it's also, if you get it, then when you get into the cycle, when then all your life is recording and touring, then it's, I don't know, what are you going to do? Write songs about being in a band? That's not that fun.
It's a dangerous road to go down, but you're kind of an old soul to me.
That's true. And that can come from, I don't know where it came from. I've always had an appreciation for the big things. I think it's tied to humor, just like if you can like make jokes with dads and grandparents, then that like already kind of levels the playing field. If
you can laugh with another generation, that levels the playing field. That's what you just said.
Yeah, more or less. Think
That's
so.
That's a big idea.
You have to be able to make them laugh too.
Yeah.
So one thing I did was I took a year off after high school and played with my band. And we weren't doing it to make it. It was kind of a weird adult decision we all made together, where we realized we weren't ready to just keep going to more school. We rehearsed like every night. We hung out every night. It made going to music school super easy in terms of what mattered. I felt like I was then came to New York with a deeper awareness of what mattered. And the big rule is always only make music with people whose company you enjoy. And it's amazing how in school that gets left.
They don't talk about that either.
Oh, no, they tell you to play with the best people, which is fine. But I think that's wrong. It's like great to be the worst person in the room. I was that a lot. But a career in music is most of the time you're not playing music. So the people you do it with better be people you love. Otherwise, why get a job doing something else that pays more and you get to go home and then you can be home. That's my take on it. That value on just like friendship and community and chasing that emotional rush of making something with people you like. I mean, that was definitely planted in high school, and just, I think that bleeds into the old soul thing. It just, you understand what matters rather than pushing for the unnecessary stuff.
So you're going on the road now.
Yeah, we leave on Tuesday.
For how long?
Month, just like around the country and back. Then we get back, and then we go to Europe for like a little over a week in early April.
Nice.
That's all we got right now, and then hope that leads to more stuff.
What happens on the other end of it? What
I have no idea. With anything. I have no idea. Yeah. We're in the question mark zone right now where we hope enough people find out about this record that they get psyched. I'm going to keep writing songs. We'll make another one. Yeah, I mean, we'll tour in the fall. That seems like the next stretch. September is when we'll tour. And either we'll play for smaller audiences than we do on this one, or the same size, or some other situation.
Or huge.
Sure, or huge. It could be huge. It could happen overnight.
Here's hoping it does.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time with me today.
Thanks for talking to me.
There it was, Adam Schatz. Kids, make your grandparents laugh. I guess I'm going to go out and try to find some music to hear in my neighborhood, if anything is open in this blizzard. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. Until then, say it with me. I'll talk to you soon.